Iran might seem like it's quiet, but it's not. The government has turned off the internet in the country. It's been blacking out all communications throughout the world. But behind the scenes, they've been fighting against their own people and removing their own population, firing at their own population time and time again. At the same time, President Trump has canceled all his meetings with the leadership of Iran. Any talks of negotiations or peace agreements, they're off the table right now. And now we crack into what's actually happening on the ground in Iran. I think we're looking at the most dramatic historic event that has taken place in our lifetime in this regime, what could possibly very much be.
Again, Mati, the most dramatic event once more in the last 2 years. I don't know where these next years is going to head this entire region and the world. But the facts are this. According to official reports of the Islamic Republic of Iran, there are more than 600 casualties in the protests right now. Yeah. But you have additional reports from outside organizations, human rights organizations that are residing outside of Iran that report of far higher numbers, more than 12,000 and up to 16,000 casualties in the protests. And not talking about those that were detained by the regimes. These numbers are tens of thousands. And the fact that the regime is doing trials, like speedy trials, and executing those protesters shows that the regime is afraid. And we don't know what will happen next.
Yeah. So today on the TBN Israel podcast, we're cracking into... Where's my camera?
That's one, Mati. I know you always look for it.
We're cracking into the history that is taking place here in this region, but we're going to take it to a positive place with an interview we're going to have talking about where this could go, also on a spiritual level and on a practical level. But let's break down the facts of what's happening on the ground. We're looking at something dramatic happening in Iran. We're looking at weeks of demonstrations where, unlike past demonstrations, it's not just about the money. It's not just about the cost of living, not just because of the depreciation or the water or the electricity or the corruption or the human rights violations.
It's all of these combined and more.
With a call to action this time. And the call to action this time, it started with down with the dictator.
Yeah.
Then it was down with Khamenei.
Personally.
Down Khamenei and the Ayatollah regime. And then they started calling on the son of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, to come back.
The prince to come back. Exactly.
To come back to Iran and replace the government. So this is, in this sense, it's a very unique series of events. It's many. It's a perfect storm of negative events taking place in Iran, both geopolitical, financial, and also that have to do with the infrastructure in the country, at the end of a public humiliation that they experienced back in Operation Midnight Hammer, or Rising Lion, as it's called in Israel, back in June of 2025. And on top of that, the massive wave of demonstrations in the streets.
Exactly.
And with a call for the replacement of the government, and the government in Iran is panicking.
I don't blame them. Listen, the streets are burning in Tehran, and they basically have only a few options that we're going to share with you just in a moment. But before we do that, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss another episode of TBN Israel, the podcast. We have some guests here with us, and if you are in Jerusalem, in this area, give us a call, come have coffee with us, join us in the TBN Israel podcast studio. But let's talk about Iran, okay? What are the options of the regime?
Yeah. Can we talk for a minute? What are the options for the people?
I think Mati, Tomer wants us to do the cue, so let's begin with the graphics. So Trump stated, keep going, take control, help is on the way. And Mati, what does that mean? Is the United States sending troops? Is the United States gonna increase the sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran, which looks like they did already a few steps in that direction, but is it enough?
Well, we don't know. What we do know, and if you look really at the series of revolutions that have taken place in, let's say, the last 50 years in the Middle East, is that there's a trend. And I'm going to break down the options. And the trend is, it's a matter of sometimes 3 days, sometimes 90 days, sometimes several years of demonstrations before something or a government is toppled over. But there's really a point in which the government breaks. That point usually can be marked by one of two things, or the government fleeing, or the government being removed by someone else.
Kind of like what happened in Syria.
Exactly.
That the leadership just moved to Russia.
Yeah, and that was teased, by the way, by what I would perceive to be Western intelligence agencies that teased the idea that Khamenei and his closest circle were about to flee Iran to a second country.
Yeah, there were reports circling that for a while. I don't know if it's real or not.
I doubt they came from the Iranian government. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
So there is that option. And usually it happens when the government stops using violence against its people, which is when the army or the secret police or the combination of them decides that they won't fight anymore against their own people and stop using weapons.
But the regime in Iran is smarter than that. They are one step ahead because they brought mercenaries from Iraq. They brought mercenaries from Lebanon, terrorists, to try and to crack down the protesters themselves. And these are people that don't speak even the same language. They're speaking Arabic. They're not speaking Persian. They're not Iranians. They're Arabs from other countries.
That's not uncommon, by the way, for dictatorships. They'll prey on the weak, they'll prey on the less intelligent, less educated, and they'll try to turn their energy, their hatred towards a perceived enemy internally. And it can be an external enemy. Let's go to war with Israel in this case.
That's why Israel is quiet right
Which is one of the options.
Yeah. Or another one is, let's turn it internally against the elites in the streets, against the people that are holding your money, against the corrupt ones. Russia does this. China does this. They do it time and time again where they turn one group of people against the others.
Venezuela didn't have the time to do that.
Yeah. Well, they were a kleptocracy that really stole so much from their people that you didn't see much resistance from within the country.
And the Iranian regime is not stealing so much from their people.
Same playbook exactly.
Right.
It's exactly the same
Best
playbook.
friends.
Yeah. So, and let's break down the options. Option number one is what everyone's been hoping for, which is that there's no need for foreign intervention, is that the Iranian people continue to demonstrate and the government gives up. And when they give up, and then it goes, there's like 5 different options here. But the main 2 are that they say, okay, we understand that you're angry. We understand that we need to make change. Let's have a series of reforms in the country. We'll have some kind of, representative system, maybe quasi, a vote system, something to make people go back home and to pretend like they're changing the government. They've tried doing this, by the way, several times in the past. They've propped up individuals who are supposed to be moderate.
Yeah.
One, externally, and secondly,
like
internally.
Presidents that are basically puppets, but
Exactly.
the Ayatollah regime is the one that is dictating what's happening.
Exactly.
We learn his name.
And also they tried to ease the economic situation in Iran by offering subsidiaries to the people. But it's like too little, too late.
Yeah.
So they basically gave them the equivalent of $7 per month to buy groceries in the shops.
Yeah, where their currency is worthless at this point, so it doesn't really matter.
But then the Mossad did the smartest thing ever.
Like comparing how much Hezbollah terrorist from the proxies that is supported by Iran is getting per month, which is $1,800 per month compared to $7 for the Iranian people themselves.
Yeah, and there's another problem there, which is it's about 4 times what the Lebanese army soldiers are getting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which causes a lot of internal problems.
Lots of problems. And Tomer is very proud of me for actually reading the text that he sends me every day for Boots on the Ground. And just, I forgot, we owe you something, guys. Mati wore a turtleneck last time. And we said that we'll do a vote about it. And I only got positive feedbacks from our viewers, so you can keep wearing it next time also.
There's one more piece of information that you're missing, is that we deleted all the negative comments. Just kidding.
So thanks for commenting, guys.
Anyway, to our point. So this is one thing which I think is very, very likely, is the Iranian government doesn't fully collapse. And I want to talk about this. In most dictatorial regimes, the elite controls 15 to 20% of everything that happens in the country. And I'll explain that. You have the first circle, government officials, let's call it clerics, religious clerics, Ayatollah, family and friends, etc. in Iran. Then you have IRGC. Then you have Basij. Then you have generals in the army, etc. But there's a very substantial layer of people that are financially linked into the IRGC and Ayatollah system. And they can be business owners, people who do infrastructure, people who own shops, people who own licenses to trade, currency exchange. The list is very, very, very long. All these people lose everything the minute the government is gone. And when you look at it from that perspective, you can understand why they're fighting and willing to use a lot of violence. It means the elite of commerce, the elite of religious life, the elite of civil governance, they're all going to lose everything they have if the government is completely overthrown. So it makes sense that they would try a middle ground. The middle ground being, let's try to do some kind of reform. Let's try to go create a different kind of government, possibly, but they still control most of the power behind the scenes.
Flip the table completely because they still depend on it.
Yeah.
So, Mati, there are planes that are basically not flying away from Iran. And just this morning, I saw reports like on social media from Iranians that were able to exit the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they say that what's happening there is just terrible. The world is not seeing it. And more than that, nobody is speaking about it.
Yeah.
Was there any United Nations resolution calling for, outrage on the Ayatollah regime for cracking down against these demonstrations against their own people violently? I didn't hear any of that.
Neither did I. That, by the way, doesn't mean that they haven't been talking about the topic. It's just that it doesn't make headlines.
Exactly.
So it shows you two things. One, I would say the events in Iran and several events that have happened recently, Ukraine is one of them, but also what's been happening in Africa has been an example. It shows you the collapse of the concept that international agencies can actually influence in a dramatic way what's happening in the world. There's only been one entity that's been able to positively change things. That's been the only sheriff in town, which is the United States.
Yeah.
The UN has been, and this is really the point, Yael, whatever they say doesn't even make headlines anymore because they've become irrelevant for the conversation.
And I don't see the university students marching in the streets saying, free Iran, free the people of Iran, like they did when Israel was defending itself against Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip.
Much worse than that. In Minneapolis, I think, there was a demonstration for the Iranian people with Israeli flags and Iranian flag, and a truck drove into the crowd full of posters of the Ayatollah regime, and it was a pro-Palestinian activist that did this event and ran over. You can see the demonstrations, like the people that demonstrate running on the truck, taking the people out of the truck that did it, and the police need to arrest them.
Yes.
Wow.
So again, we're talking about the options. The options are, one, there's a semi-collapse of the government. Two is there's, let's call it light-handed intervention in what's happening in Iran. I would venture to say that that's already happening. That means intelligence work. It means working with dissidents, with, let's call it anti-government elements within Iranian society, giving them intelligence, giving them internet access. That's already happened with Starlink, equipping them.
Trying to do it. The Iranians cracked down on the Starlink capabilities.
I can tell you with a high level of certainty that multiple countries are already engaged in what's happening on the ground in Iran. They're just not openly fighting against the Iranians. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. And then the third one, which is what everyone's going for, is Uncle Sam comes in and he bombs the Iranian government. What we call direct military intervention.
Exactly.
That's what people are expecting to happen.
Yeah, but there are a few other options that we discussed yesterday or a few days ago in our live, with a cyber attack and with maybe covert operations, spy activities to try and topple the regime without just bombing from the air.
Yeah.
But what we see here is, I think, one leader in the world, which is Donald Trump, that is actually making a stand for the Iranian people.
Yeah.
And then
the only one.
Alongside him, you have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that is stating again and again that Israel is rooting for the Iranian people to have freedom, to have a better leadership, and we are wanting to have relationship with them. We want to be able to do business together. And there was even talk about moving Iran into the Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
So that can be very interesting. But we have a very special guest with us here in the studio, Dr. Erez Tzoref of One for Israel. And I think that we can have him here join us. Mati, you come next to me and Erez will come here. And let's discuss leadership now compared to leadership in the Bible, especially regarding the time of Nehemiah. I don't know how you say that in English. Nehemiah? Yeah, okay.
Let's do it. You might notice there's someone new in the frame. Dr. Erez Tzoref, who's joined us.
How's it going?
What's up, Erez?
Good to see you guys.
So we're here. I want to frame this conversation. We don't typically do this on the podcast, but I think the time calls for it. We want to combine the biblical narrative and the lessons from that with the time that we're living in. We're living in a time where leadership matters, I think, more than ever in my lifetime, possibly multiple lifetimes, where drama is at a peak in the Middle East and around the world, and everyone's looking for that leader, that person, to make the right decision, and everyone who's living under a leader who's made the wrong decision is suffering greatly from that. Mm-hmm. You just wrote a book on Nehemiah, who's him together with Ezra, these archetypes of the biblical leader. You could write a book about it, which you did.
So Nehemiah in English. Nehemiah.
Yes.
Nehemiah. Okay.
Nehemiah. An easy word that rolls off the tongue for English speakers. Nehemiah. Erez, first of all, welcome.
Yeah, great to be with you guys.
And
Appreciate
tell me,
it.
what led you to write this book?
So, Nehemiah has been a biblical figure that I found to be inspirational for many, many, many years. And through my years as the years passed and more leadership was given to me personally, I was looking for advice. I was looking for wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking, if you will, for mentorship. I had wonderful human mentors, but I also, as I looked at the Word of God, I found Nehemiah to be very, very inspirational. And as you mentioned previously, I could not notice that there are similarities in the times that we're living and the times that Nehemiah lived.
Yeah.
So he was a civil leader. He was not a spiritual leader primarily, but he knew the Word of God. He left his comfortable position, very high position, left everything, came to to Judea, to Israel, to Jerusalem, who was in ruins at the time, and dedicated his life to build the wall around Jerusalem that enabled life again, and in a lot of ways, preparation for the first coming of the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
so
that's a hard job.
it's a hard task.
I bet he had to raise money, he had to raise support, because anytime you do something new, people are against you in everything in your life, basically.
And as Mati mentioned earlier, as we look to leaders, what stands out in Nehemiah's life is that he was willing to personally sacrifice, personal sacrifice. He wasn't doing it for the perks. He already had the perks. He had a very high position. He was willing to leave it, forfeit his salary, support the work personally. And I work, with stone and grind and hammer for extended period of time while receiving no honor whatsoever, just a tax.
My favorite part of the story of Nehemiah is that he told his people that worked on the wall to work with one hand and then to have a sword with the other hand, which seems like what's happening now in Israel. Like if you come here to Jerusalem and we have a guest with us in the studio that see all the cranes, the city is building, the economy is still growing despite the fact that Mati is many months every year in the reserves.
I'm just not doing good enough of a job, that's why.
Hundreds of thousands of other Israelis have to leave their houses, jobs, wives, family, and go defend the country.
A very big thing. It's a very, very, very big thing and very real for us now, as you say. And, we're just chatting before the broadcast and Mati says that he's actually going back right after or something. So it affects a lot of people.
It's important for me to note that I'm speaking on my own accord and not behalf of the IDF.
Of course.
I've been asked to specify that when I speak.
Yes.
But to our point, I think the parallels are amazing. I did a teaching on the book of Malachi like a month ago. And then you start really like learning the context of everything that happened. We're talking 6th, 7th century BCE, what happens in this region, what the country is. The parallels are amazing. You have the Iranians on the one, the Persians on the one hand. You have a Jewish leader that comes out of that sort of backdrop. You have a country that's in shambles, that's being rebuilt. You have enemies in every direction that you look. I mean, the list, it literally is almost like it was written for this story. And here we're living today. So connect the biblical for us with the practical today. Like what can we look at in the book of Nehemiah and in your book that talks about it that is applicable for people that want to be a leader or are leading people today?
So we are looking at, the book looks both at Nehemiah as a person, as a leader, who is both leading a civil task, but is also well-versed in the Word of God and, deep spiritual interest. The honor of God is something that is always before him. That's on the one hand. I think on the bigger picture, it's also tells the story of Israel from a different perspective. The things that prepared the way for the first coming of the Messiah that happened back then, comparing it to what's happening now. Here we are, when did you have Jewish believers in Jesus that have, we have a way with our own people, we can talk to other people around the world about it. When did that happen?
Once before.
Once before, in the book of Acts. Exactly right. That's exactly right. And so the idea is, as part of the parallel, I think the interesting is that God is using us and others around the world and around the country, obviously, to prepare the way for the second coming of the Messiah. That may take a long time. I don't know when it will happen. We all have our own perspectives on that. But, it took Nehemiah. It was 400 years after he was alive. But it did happen, much as the second coming will happen.
Maybe help us lay let's call it the philosophical understanding. Because you have Nehemiah, Ezra, and then they're described sort of as this last touch to what comes before the time of the New Testament, essentially.
Right.
And it's this buildup that I think we're living in today, where you have all these things happening at the same time: the spiritual, the physical, the enemy threat. Let's call the external threats. Where do you see those parallels? Like, what was the story back then, and what is it now?
Well, I think the state of Israel now, we are about to celebrate the 77th, if I remember correctly, anniversary of the state, or independence of the state. And in a lot of ways, I think we've grown kind of accustomed to to several things living here. First of all, there's always threats, right? Yeah. There's always threats from outside and tensions from inside. I mean, this is something we live with. Secondly, I think some of the initial economic pressures, many of our grandparents' generations came and they literally had to dry out swamps or live in tents. Now we live fairly comfortably, relatively speaking, to the Middle East, and we gotten used to it. But we can't forget how it started. We can, if our grandparents are alive, we can ask them.
Yeah, exactly. Not far ago.
So that in that respect, I think that's some of the parallel. On the other, I think we also see that also in the latter part of the book of Nehemiah. When we grow comfortable as a people, just human nature, we forget God. We forget what we promised. We forget what we, what we said we were going to do. And then sometimes when difficulties occur again, then it helps us, drives us again to God. And I think in a lot of ways, even what we as a nation experienced the last couple of years, turns the hearts of a lot of our people back to God to find a meaning. Why is this happening? Why does everybody seem to hate us so much?
Exactly.
I mean, what's going on?
It's a spiritual war.
It is.
And it seems like also back then it was a spiritual war.
Yeah.
What I like about Nehemiah compared to Ezra is that he was like a practical man, less like the spiritual leader, but more practical. He raised up money from the rich Jews of Persia, then combined the people here, tried to create coalitions to build the walls practically, while Ezra was doing the spiritual side of it. So I like the two things go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
So you can pray, you can, believe that God will deliver us from the situation, but you also need to act and take action. And I think this is what we are now in the middle of around the world, the people of Iran. Like, people are praying, people are waiting for God to intervene, and some people are also acting.
Doing something,
Exactly.
Right.
So a few ways that you can help in actually acting, guys, and this is something that we are sharing from day one here at TBN Israel, is by sharing the truth, because the truth is the first thing that gets lost when everything is happening. This is a spiritual war. We need to share the truth and we need to pray. These are two very important things, okay? And then hopefully our leaders will also act in preventing the regime in Iran from attacking its own people and create a better future for them, for the whole Middle East.
An interesting point of parallel, and we kind of chatted about it a little bit beforehand, is that the ruling power in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah are the Persians. The Persian king is basically like, the ruler of the known world.
Of the entire half of Middle East,
Yeah, you bet. However, he's very, very, very positive to Ezra, to Nehemiah, to the Jewish people in general. And so we pray that this too will be a parallel in our day, hopefully soon.
I think there's another lesson here. So one of our national sports in the Middle East is hating our leaders and criticizing.
Israelis are number one in it.
And Israelis
started with Moses.
We're the worldwide champions year on year in that topic. And when you look at the reality of it, and I do, and I think you have too, looking at Nehemiah, in retrospect, this man, let's lay out his day to day. He's being criticized constantly. And you read this in writings around the events of his life, where there's the people of Israel, they do the same thing they've always done throughout history, and especially biblical history. They complain. Why have you brought us back to this land? Yeah. Take us back.
Back to Egypt.
Well, it was once Egypt, then it's Babylon, then Persia, and they say,
now it's back to Europe, the United States, relocation.
You were wrong. You told us it would be good here. The temple isn't built, and the Samaritans are persecuting us, and we don't have funds, and our fields are not growing, and the list goes on and on and on. When you really contextualize it, it's decades of this. Yes. It's not like months. It's not like the project was over at Bang City. I showed you were all wrong. No. A lifetime of this, of complaining. And he's stretching out their faith. He's stretching out their actions. He's always like 3 or 4 steps in front of them, which is an incredibly dangerous place to be as a leader, because it's within fire range of your people. And he's pulling them into this place where they finally can fulfill the promise. But it takes several leaders to say, this is the right thing to do. Regardless of the difficulty, regardless of the hardship, we need to do that. And for me, that's a lesson about how I need to look up to my country's leaders and other leaders around the world. They might be seeing something because of where God put them that we're not seeing from where we're sitting right now.
I couldn't agree more. And I would say that there's several things that really stand out in Nehemiah's example. Yes, he was under attack from outside, from inside. And I think we can learn a lot from the way he dealt with it. And what really stands out in the book, that several times, if I remember correctly, it's 7 or 8 times, Nehemiah asks God, he says, God, remember this. He never asks anybody else to remember, because, as people, we forget. Certainly when we look up to our leaders, you look for the best example. As you say, we're easy on criticizing, but Nehemiah says, God, you remember, because nobody else going to remember anything that I've done. And that's another, I think, lesson for leadership. I mean, leaning on God and also realizing that he's probably going to be the only one that's going to remember what we did, because nobody else will.
Exactly.
Not the good things, at least.
No.
And that's, by the way, I believe this is one of the main reasons that the Bible calls us to pray for our leaders.
Yeah.
National leaders, municipal leaders, world leaders. This is one of the reasons we're called to pray for them. It's a lonely place.
It's as we say in Hebrew, it's a chidush. It's something new in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Because I think they learned the lessons of constantly persecuting and complaining about your leaders. What else can we find in this book of Nehemiah? Because I'm looking at the leadership model that he presents, and he does a few things that I think are incredible. One, he's a great organizer. And I think we fail to recognize sometimes the quality of people that know how to do things well and orchestrate them well. 2, he puts up this grandiose, like, we're going to do this. And everyone says, it's impossible, it's crazy. Why?
Look at these rocks. They are half burnt. How can they be reassembled?
Yeah. What can we pull for that for today if we're wanting to lead other people or look at our leaders in the right way?
Well, so that's one of the main focus of the book, the foresight of the book, I guess, is, well, what can we learn today for ourselves and to pray for the people that God put as leaders in our lives? That's definitely one of the focal points. One thing that maybe I can give an example, he had to deal a lot with threats, intimidation, this how do you call despisement? Like people were mocking
persecution, basically.
And various forms of persecution. And also in the book, we look a little bit, we give some examples, not many, but how did that look for us at One for Israel? I mean, we're a local Israeli organization. We started very, very humbly. We're still humble, but God used us in pretty significant ways in the last several years, at least here in Israel. And so, again, we try to look to our experience as well and share a little bit of that too.
I'll do what we don't typically do. And I'll say this, that we don't like saying, it's amazing work, et cetera, and praising other people. There's an element of spiritual restoration in this land which seems to people who come and visit now as this obvious thing. Well, obviously there are congregations in Israel. Obviously there are Jews who believe in Christ. Obviously there's a thriving community. Obviously you have, this financial element. Obviously none of it is obvious. None of it is clear. None of it should have happened in the way people imagine that it did. And you guys, and there are others who are also involved in this, did a lot to bring the name of Christ back to the people of Israel. And people look at it today and they say, well, again, they think it's an obvious thing. It's always obvious in hindsight. In real time, I need to contextualize this for people. When I was born, so you're slightly older than me. When I was born, and a few years before that, congregations in Israel were physically persecuted for their faith, not cursed, not financial problems. They were physically attacked to the point of almost lynches at times by the population around them for the fear of the message of Christ. And that has been so radically transformed that now I command mostly Orthodox people, and I meet a lot of people with a head covering because of their religious faith. You say the name Yeshua, Jesus, to people, and the response is almost overwhelmingly positive. And it's because of decades of work that you guys have done, of explaining, of exposing, of opening up the conversation topic time and time and time again, then now we get to bear the fruit of that. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't linear. It shouldn't have happened aside from the spiritual work that went into it to really restore that element in Israeli society.
Sure. And it has been absolutely, it is absolutely our privilege. And of course, as you mentioned, it's important for me to say, we at One for Israel cooperate with many, many others as well. And it's a communal work for many of us, but it's certainly been a privilege to be part of it.
Yeah. I think there's more to say, though, which is, and we've talked about this in the past in person,
Right.
which is you were called to a role of leadership, as were several others in the country. And people at the time look at it, as did you, and say, I don't understand how we'd be able to do this. The opposition is too great. The financial burden is too high. The logistical, and who will do it, and who will be the people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it happens, and everyone says, "Oh, look,
yeah,
oh yeah,
we know
look."
that's
It was
easy.
easy,
It's
of
easy,
course,
of course.
It was easy. It wasn't easy. We've talked about this extensively. It was not easy. It was not obvious. You've been faithful. The organization you lead has been faithful, as have others in promoting the faith in Israel. And when you combine those stories, going back to Nehemiah, I look at this from, let's say, from a personal perspective. People say, "Oh, look, we get to, we live a free spiritual life. We live a free, let's call it a defense level or security level life in this country. We live a life of financial prosperity." It goes back to people like Nehemiah,
Yes.
a man who had to build something knowing full well that it was impossible on every possible level at the time. That infrastructure was what allowed Jesus to come back. There was a temple once again in Israel, and there was a Jewish people back in the land, which shouldn't have happened unless Nehemiah and Ezra and several others were obedient to it. The same happened today in the Israel that we're living in.
Yeah.
We have the spiritual, we have the physical, we have the financial, because multiple people were obedient. I think that's a huge takeaway of looking at that and saying, if it looks like someone's crazy and is 5 or 6 steps ahead of you and you think he's going the wrong way, he might be right. He might be hearing from God. Now, he might not. You need to be careful with that. But I think there's a lesson there.
And I love to talk about those topics also with a lot of young people, both at our Bible College and other training programs, and say to them, well, what is your dream? What is your dream? What is your prayer? What is your opportunity? These are some of the things we discuss in the book. Yeah. And, again, not just looking back, but looking forward. Mm-hmm. There's still so much work for us to do, and there's just so much that can be done. And, and it's part of the inspiration that we get from Nehemiah.
What does this change for you on a personal level? I know the experience. You spend time sort of diving into a topic. What clicked in your head that you didn't know before?
I think writing this book and doing this teaching, it's a teaching series, and then writing the book, I think it kind of marks a season in a lot of ways. We've just celebrated our 35th anniversary as One for Israel. The various stages
branches
and branches now, but I think it symbolizes a season, as you said, Mati. That now we are. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do, but we're at the season where you can also look back, appreciate what was, and then look hopeful to what is and yet to come.
Where we can get the book and where we can order that?
Yeah, so you can get the book. You want to say?
Yeah, sure, I'll say. So guys, if you want a book, Nehemiah, however you say it in English, this is a great book about what's happening in the Bible, but also what is happening now. I love the comparison between a leader with a vision to the leaders that we have now all around us, because what's happening now is biblical prophecy coming to fruition in our times. And God is doing amazing miracles in modern days. So it's always very important to connect your foundation to the Bible so that you'll know what's happening. Is this aligning with God wants to happen in our days and in our time? Okay, so there is a QR code and you can scan it. Let's put it on the screen somewhere. We'll add it in the post, and you can then get the book. And it's on Amazon also. Nehemiah by Dr. Erez Tzoref. Did I miss anything?
Thank you so much.
I think it's all. I want to add something else. I think this is important for another reason, which is a lot of people are afraid of diving into the Old Testament because the stories are complex and it's historical and the names don't make any sense, and and all the Hebrew names they don't click for someone who doesn't speak the language. These things are important because I believe God has those stories in the Bible for a reason, because He wants to speak to us through that text, to show His identity to us through that text. And you have to really go through a process of working through the content of the story and understanding all of it to come up with something that says, this is what He's been trying to say. Listen, This is what he's trying to say. You've done that for Nehemiah. I think it's incredibly important because it foreshadows what happens in the second temple, which is Jesus coming back and being sent. And that required the obedience of this man. And we need to look at his leadership as a model of what can come when you follow God in the way that he intended, because it brings, in one case, the Messiah. And then in our lifetime, it brings the modern state of Israel, the salvation of the Jewish people, and many more things, all the way to the second coming. Yeah. However that happens, we're not sure.
Yeah, meant to that.
Yeah. Exactly. What else is? What would you say if you want to dive into the mind of someone who's reading this book, and you say, here's what you need to know about this person and how it's going to shape your prayer life, your faith walk, your biblical understanding? What does that sound like?
So the wall that Nehemiah was called to build is in a lot of ways it's kind of tells each one of us, or at least begs each one of us to ask God, well, what's the wall you're calling me to do? You're calling me to be a part of something that's bigger than myself, something that's has more meaning than just me. And you mentioned prayer. This is something that's very, very important in Nehemiah's life. Yeah. Prayer he was a man of prayer, and it calls us to soak in, so to speak, in seeking God's face. I mean, again, I have a lot of ideas. But I have to test them and lay them down before God to know which one comes from him and which one comes from, my own flesh or my own desires or my own, just imagination. And so prayer is something that's very, very central. And as I kind of circle back to where I started, personal sacrifice. Because at the end of the day, when we step out on a limb to do something that's bigger than ourselves, something we believe God has called us to do, that we know we can't do in our own strength, that always involves personal sacrifice of one kind or another. And so, I think my prayer is that people will find the book inspirational, and it would cause them to love the Word of God more. As you mentioned, it's important to understand kind of the background and what went on there. But the book is written in a very readable way. It's not a scholarly book written as a Bible interpretation per se, like a commentary. It's not written like that. It's a lot more expository and applicable.
Good. I'm happy to hear.
Yeah.
It'll make it a lot easier to read.
Well, English is not my mother tongue, so it's got to be more
Mati,
simple.
do you have a pen? I want a dedication here.
We'll get dedication. And I'll say one more thing is, this is a book about leadership. And then you always have the guy or the gal in the background who says, well, I'm not a leader. And I call nonsense on that.
Absolutely.
Everyone is a leader. You lead yourself first, then your household, and then every person has an influence on others that they need to carry out, especially in this digital age. There's always a way for you to influence other people. This is a tool people need to have because God put a secret in the Bible, and my belief is I haven't read the book yet, but I will read it, as that this is going to help unpack what that secret is to people today.
For sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. So guys, thank you for being with us. One thing that I call on all of you to do now is to pray. Pray for the people of Iran. Pray for our leaders, for your leaders, because they have a very, very tough job. And make sure to keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you again next time for another episode of TBN Israel, the podcast. Thank you very much, Erez.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.